Welcome to CareCast, exploring the heart of care. CareCast is a podcast created by Careosity. Careosity is a private in-home care provider. Careosity. Be home, be well.
Hello.
Miss Cicely Baker, how are you?
Greetings. How are you today? I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
You bet. Welcome to the CareCast, everyone. I am your host, Jeremy Watkins. And of course, as always, we have Miss Cicely Baker with us, who has been on quite a few of our episodes. Um, Cicely Baker, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience again and just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Yeah, it just seemed like podcasts. It hit home runs for me. My name is Baker, and I never get tired of introducing myself. I am the founder of Be Patient Caregiving in Spartanburg, South Carolina. We are a three-tier non-medical in-home care provider. We do private care. We do voucher services, contract services, state services, and we do concierge service as well as transportation. We have a heart for our most vulnerable community in our area, and we are in the processes of partnership with our care home and Curiosity. We want to turn this caregiving community into more than just in the state, going from state to state.
Mm.
So I'm glad to be here again today. Mr. Jeremy is so amazing. I enjoy podcasting with him, and the subjects are so intense when we talk.
I know it.
Every time, but it brings a joyful noise to not
Hmm.
only us, but it also brings a sense of peace, a sense of relief, a joyful noise to our listeners who we are very, very into and want to help as much as possible. So that's the purpose of doing these podcasts, is getting much needed information out to as many as listeners as possible and helping you in the caregiving process and where you are right now.
Mm, good stuff. Also, Cicely Baker was a speaker at the recent iHeart Home Care event that we held here in Christiansburg. She drove all the way up from South Carolina just to be with us and speak to you guys. And she gave a couple great talks. One on ADLs, that's activities of daily living, and another amazing talk on dementia care. And if you'd like to hear those talks by Cicely, you can go to the Carosity YouTube page and you'll be able to immediately see the iHeart Home Care talks uploaded. Or you can go to the Carosity TikTok page. I just recently uploaded the videos and the audio there. Um, well, today we are going to get into a pretty sensitive subject, um, but one that absolutely has to be talked about, and that is handling combative and other behaviors from those we care for.
Yes. Yes.
Um, this, I believe, is definitely a sensitive subject because I feel like it's not only not talked about enough, there's not a lot of training and not a lot of what to do, not a lot of education in how to handle these particular circumstances. So, education is definitely imperative as a caregiver in all aspects. You have to know as a caregiver that a lot of the times you think you know what's to be expected, but that is usually when things go awry and what you expected does not occur. So be prepared for the unexpected as a caregiver.
Yeah.
Always be prepared.
Yes. Absolutely.
Mhm. Aggressive behaviors will definitely happen in some way, shape, or form. And they can happen for a variety of reasons. The person that you care for could be feeling inadequate. They could be going through some depression and anxiety. There could be some frustrations there due to loss of mental capacity or disease and health conditions. There could be life circumstances, that are not really making them happy. There could be family matters
Mhm.
going on that you know nothing about that
Right.
could be, aggravating them. So there's an array of reasons. Um, and Cicely's going to get to it later on. She's going to get into how we can come to terms and figure out what the root cause is. Aggressive behaviors can include refusal of care, lashing out verbally, withdrawing or seclusion, physical aggression, that would be grabbing or pushing you away, or even resulting in physical violence, God forbid. Um, all aggressive behaviors are a form of abuse. However, there is a difference between abuse from a patient to caregiver and a caregiver to patient abuse. Patient to caregiver abuse is what we're going to call aggressive behaviors, because a lot of the people that need caregivers, um, I'll go back to what I said earlier about, they have a loss of mental capacity or disease and health conditions. And a lot of times they won't be able to even control what they do,
Right.
um, or even let alone know exactly what they're doing, especially if someone has dementia and Alzheimer's, anything that affects the mind will affect that person's ability to come to terms with reality. Their
Right.
reality is a lot different than ours.
That's right. That is.
So hmm?
I was agreeing with you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
um so caregivers definitely need to be educated on de-escalation. Caregivers have rights as well. If you are caring for someone and they have highly aggressive, uncontrollable behaviors, you have rights. You have the right to not be injured, to protect yourself. But that doesn't mean to fight back. That means that if the behavior is out of control, you need to move away from the patient or leave the room and seek immediate help. And that could be help from family. You could even go as far as calling 911 to try to get some assistance, if the behavior is that out of control. And of course, if you have a supervisor, immediately notify your supervisor or the RN in charge, whomever. But always seek immediate help if the situation is out of control.
Right.
So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Cicely, and she's going to go over on how to de-escalate aggressive behavior situations. Cicely, go ahead.
All right, you guys. So Jeremy talked about a lot of good things. So my job is today to take what he said and break it down to you in more simplified terms. So the approach that I take with teaching and helping people understand things is a hands-on approach. So let's just create a situation. We're in a room and we have a caregiver and we have a client. And there may be some discrepancies in this room with this caregiver and this client. And there is some aggression coming from the client. So, Jeremy, your experience, was the aggression coming from the caregiver or the client?
In my most experiences that I have, it's coming from the client,
Okay.
the aggressive behavior.
All right. So you have a client that's aggressive and you have a caregiver. So understand this. The caregiver has a lot to think about because if she was in a facility and human resource had to get involved, these are the questions they would have asked her. So there's a lot of things that she would need to do to de-escalate that situation. And that starts to let's roll this video back
Mm-hmm.
to the beginning when they first hired them and they went through the first couple of weeks of in services when they went through onboarding. During onboarding, there should have been some education, some
Mm-hmm.
educational materials, and there all should have been some hands-on training, like maybe some mock interviews or some mock moments where you train those caregivers how to handle a combative situation. Now, when you're trying to handle a combative situation, there's a lot of components that's connected to that. One is safety. While
Mm-hmm.
she is having to keep her posture, not alarm the client that, she's aware that if something is going on, and not respond to this client, um in a combative way. She has to remain humble.
Mm-hmm.
She has to act like everything is okay. She has to keep control of the situation, not turn her back against the client, and make sure that the client is safe. She has to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that the client cannot hurt himself or anyone or anything in that room in her de-escalation process. So she's
Yes.
scanning the room
Mm.
to make sure that everything, if he's in a wheelchair, she's scanning that wheelchair for locks while she's talking to him, trying to get him to humble himself. She's taking those steps and having a casual conversation. She's watching her body language, not to shift too quick, not to show any stress or agitation, because she's trying to reduce agitation.
Mm-hmm.
So she has to really use all her senses at this point, because it is very, very important that, even though this client is screaming and hollering or upset, that she keeps a humble energy with
Mm-hmm.
that client, that she can de-escalate him. So while she's looking to make sure everything is safe, he's out of harm, he or she is out of harm, at the front of
I'd like to jump in right here just for a second, Cicely. I'm
yeah.
sorry for interrupting you, but I'm really big on cognitive actions and emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is really key in these
Hmm.
situations,
Hmm.
because your knee jerk reaction, if someone immediately becomes aggressive,
Yep.
your self preservation is going to kick in, and you're either going to obviously protect yourself, but you're not going to be in the mind frame of looking for safety for the other person that's being aggressive. And this is where your emotional intelligence comes in.
And this is where also you're in services. So that's why it is very important for agencies to continue to have these in services, because you're right. You may be caught in a moment and you're not thinking. So
Hmm.
that's why it is very important to continue to have these in services. And also, in every home that you supply services to, there should be a client handbook in
Hmm.
that home, and in that handbook, those in services that you have talked about, the same in services that you are teaching repetitively, those in services, copies of those services should be there for the caregivers as a reminder when they have
Hmm.
downtime and they look at this book should have the care plan in it for the client. It should have your client handbook, all the things, parts and control and all that. There should be a section for your caregivers to be able to study and refresh themselves on these in services. And that could save a caregiver and a client from a bad situation, because like we don't know when they're gonna get upset. We don't know what
Hmm.
happened. We don't know the triggers. But what if a
Right.
trigger happened that day, and so happened the caregiver had just finished reading your handbook?
Hmm.
That could be an amazing turnaround.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, it could be an amazing, turnaround. So, and I was just putting those pointers out there for our listeners, and of
Hmm.
course, in a real day, that don't really happen that way, but it it helps keep the caregiver in line too, because when they come before you and you have to talk about the situation, that yeah, we have empathy for the caregiver. She didn't know
Hmm.
it was going to happen, but at the same time, she has training, and,
Yes.
and in a combative situation, we have to separate logic from emotions, even though
Hmm.
we have an emotional state that's going on. But on the outer realm, to make the situation right, we really have to stick to our in services, our logic, and our policy and procedures. Yes, we are
Yes.
using our emotional behaviors to control the situation, but we have to be logically, because when you sit down to talk to that caregiver and you sit down to talk to that client gonna have his triggers, her triggers, reasons. Then you're gonna have the
Hmm.
caregiver. So where do you draw the line with disciplinary action?
Yeah.
So it's very important that you teach these steps, even though we know it don't normally happen like that. But we
Hmm.
still have to filter and teach those steps, and continue to send reminders to our caregivers, on the policy and procedures of our company. And this is what we do. And the more we teach it, the more that it's repetitive, the more that those moments that pop up like that, when
Hmm.
it pop up like that, the memory of them in service is gonna pop up right with it.
Yes. So, Cicely, tell me why, in your opinion, do you think that home care companies and facilities don't touch base on how to de-escalate aggressive behavior situations as much as they should?
I think time we gotten in a different place than where we used to be a decade, anywhere from 5 years to a decade ago, where we had time to measure those points and to revise our policy and procedures and have
Hmm.
teams to go over those things to make sure our companies was running effectively based on liability insurance, general liability insurance. We've gotten away with everything being in competition and
Hmm.
uh growing into this new age where everything now is fast paced. So companies are
Yes.
having to cut costs due to inflation and cut costs due to the cost of living rising in our economy. So it's
Hmm.
easier to cut the cost of training. It's easier just to say, well, we can make the training online. We can make a quick link. You know,
Hmm.
um, you can study at your own pace at home in the privacy of your own home. We're not going to take up a lot of time, you know, training you on all this because we need to get you in the job and get the job done quickly.
Yeah.
But what about the quality of the services that you're providing? What about
Bingo.
the quality of the caregiver that you're putting in their home? You're
Hmm.
signing contracts with people. You're promising high end individuals, but are you giving them the high end training and in service they need to
Yes.
produce at
Absolutely.
any capacity? Because you should have caregivers that can go in any home. Your caregiver should always be cross trained. That's the
Hmm.
whole point of having onboarding. That's why you do onboarding classes, and you have anywhere from 1 to 10 caregivers in the same class with the same onboarding education. They should be able to do multiple clients because they're sticking to the policy and procedures. They're sticking to the trade line. They're sticking to the in services and they're sticking to the training. And then you should have your follow up trainings throughout the year.
Hmm.
Even if they call you on the phone and they're talking about a problem, immediately pull out your in service sheet and write
Hmm.
that staff member down, their name down, and
Yes.
and what they're talking about, and that's an in service.
Hmm.
And at the end, before you end that call, say thank you for calling me. I am open to listening to you and seeing how we can best resolve this situation. Do you
Hmm.
remember the in services that we did on boundaries?
Yes.
Well, let's go over that right now if you have the time. If not, can we book a time for you to come into the office and let's go over these in services so we can help de escalate the situation and help
Hmm.
you still be comfortable with your job and your position. Now, there may be a case where you have to move that staff from their home
Hmm.
and put her in another home. But before you put her in another home, let her take that time off to think about what just happened. Now,
Yes.
and it gives you time to go and talk to the family member and the client, so and
Mm.
then you and your human resource staff will come together, staff development, and you guys will work on that situation and make the best decision possible.
I think I just had an idea about kind of gauging where caregivers are as far as their education and how much they remember or how much they recall. Sending out like a short survey of different questions like how would you handle this aggressive behavior situation? How would you handle this harassment situation? In a home care facility, not facility, home care setting. Um,
So you
that.
can do competency tests. I do
Mhm.
competency tests, and the competency test is done during and service. And
Mhm.
you can do those competency tests as many times as you want to, and
Mhm.
you can name them annual reviews, and then you can create your annual reviews, which will have certain end services that they need to know that's based off of your hiring process and it's based off their onboarding. Because like
Mhm.
my onboarding for my staff, they get a South Carolina independent caregiver license and it's real.
Mhm.
and it sticks because I'm making sure that this caregiver that I'm hiring, she has some type of certification, whether if she is a CNA or not, she still
Mm-hmm.
has some type of certification, some type of training under her belt before she go into that home.
Yes.
And if she's a CNA, that's plus because she's getting triple the education.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
gotten you know, I think our companies are set up a little different as far as how we hire and who we hire. Where I have independent contracted caregivers, you have actual W-2 employees,
Yes.
and the regulations are a little different when it comes to those. So for me, uh, I always shoot for the experienced licensed caregiver, um, because I am looking for self-employed um, type people who don't need a lot of training. But I am finding that even a lot of seasoned CNAs still need some refresher courses
They
like
do.
continuing education.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can vouch for that being a CNA. I am
Hmm.
myself a CNA, and we keep our license renewed every 2 years, and all
Hmm.
that stuff like that. But as I am constantly educating new hire, I go over those competency tests myself and educate
Hmm.
myself, so
Yes.
I can be, because they would come in and say, well, I need help with question number 12. Well, when
Hmm.
your staff say that to you, in their mind, you already know.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
best that you get on board and already know. Like they
Yes.
giving you the benefit, they looking up to you, looking for you as for the answer. So you need to
Hmm.
know what number 12 is.
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely.
So let's see. Let's go ahead and quickly just kind of recap the bullet point steps to de-escalate an aggressive behavior situation.
Okay, so like I was saying, when you de-escalate and you're in this room with this client, and the client is I know a normal particular day, we're not thinking of the steps, but there are steps to take. First of all, the first
Hmm.
step is safety. First of all, you need to catch eye contact, have a humble spirit with this client to understand why they are upset, what triggered them to get to this space. So there are no sudden moves. You need to maintain your composure, period.
Hmm. And clear communication.
Right. And you need to be aware of your emotions as a caregiver, because sometimes we shift quickly. We can
Hmm.
shift as caregivers, because I'm a caregiver, I'm a CNA. I will walk in those shoes for all the
Hmm.
caregivers and the CNAs out here that's listening to this. We have to be aware of our emotion, because sometimes we may not even know, because we're so focused on that client. We may not, and sometimes the tone of our voice can change, and
Hmm.
and somebody said, "Why you hollering at me?" And at that moment, that's when you realize, "Oh, I had done raised my voice."
Right.
Your body language. Stay humble if you can. Don't move too
Hmm.
sudden. Don't look like you bucking, or don't be looking like you're in a defensive state of mind. Your
Squaring up.
stance. Yeah. Maintain eye contact with that client. Let them know you are there. Keep your arms,
Hmm.
to your side. Maintain a safe distance. If the
Yes.
potential for violence exists, no physical contact. Do not
Yes.
initiate physical contact, with that resident's behavior, as you're trying to, you know, uh de-escalate the situation.
Hmm.
And then safety, take a deep breath and just step back
Yes.
and listen. Be a
Mm.
master listener to that client. And if that client continues to be aggressive, well, you don't have time to scan the room while you was talking
Hmm.
and making sure you stay in space. You see that the wheelchair's locked, they're safe, they're not going to fall or harm themselves. Never turn your back, but walk
Hmm.
backwards to the door if you need to get more help.
Yes.
And leave. Then once somebody else is there, then you leave the room, but you never leave the room during a situation like that. It's just going to make that person even more upset, and they're
Hmm.
going to they're going to get worse, but as that caregiver responds and approaches that resident from the front and not the back, she or he is responding calmly. They're providing
Yes.
support with a positive, friendly facial expression while you're catching contact. Smile.
Mm-hmm.
Give them your beautiful smile to help, remain objective to them, and be the best active listener that you can be, and protect not only yourself but the client. Be self-aware, of what's
Mm-hmm.
going on around you, and then immediately.
I'd like to, sorry, I'd like to add to your when while you're visually looking for safety measures to make sure the client is safe. Also, kind of be aware of what could possibly be the source of aggravation to the
That's
client.
right. That's why you talk calmly.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you become a master listener and you listen. You're going to listen more than you're going to talk.
Yeah.
Because if they're talking and they're mad, let them get it off their chest. Let it on out and listen to
Yes.
the things that they're saying and listen to the things that they're not saying. But by the care plan, they in a care plan, some of those aggressions are going to be in there and it's going to be written down. So you're going to know. You just got to be mindful of the triggers, what trigger
Mm-hmm.
that client, and how to de-escalate. And a lot of times, just listening to them helps calm them down. Listen to them, or either that person leaving the room and bringing another person in can help
Mm-hmm.
de-escalate the situation. But treating the situation with the utmost respect also
Mm-hmm.
de-escalate a situation as
Yes.
well.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to remember that these are people too.
Mm-hmm.
They have feelings, they have thoughts, they have emotions, they have pains. They've lived a long life. We need to treat them as people, as we would want to be treated.
Right, and we have to understand this person is no longer independent.
Hmm.
So they're dependent upon you. So there are going to be some good days and some bad days. And,
Yeah.
our caregivers, we train our caregivers to leave whatever you got going on in your life at the door.
Exactly.
Don't bring it into that space, because a lot of
Hmm.
times these clients can kind of feel your spirit. They can tell
Oh yes.
when you're in a good mood and when you're not, and some of them can trigger you, and then you turn around and
Hmm.
show out on the client and say it's the client, it was you all along after we done the investigation. Now you're finna get disciplinary actions because you was not truthful about the situation, because the incident
Right.
has to be filled out.
Yes. I was just for a quick example. I was on a phone call with a client just yesterday, and I was asking how things went with a particular caregiver and how the day went with that caregiver. And he said, well, it was a normal day, but, it wasn't very pleasant. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said that, well, the caregiver just seemed like she was on another planet. She wasn't really paying attention. When I tried to speak to her, she was constantly on her phone. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I had to handle, that situation. And, come to find out that this caregiver had some things going on in her life that was that she brought to work, and she didn't leave at the door, and she was allowing it to affect her uh, job as a caregiver with that client.
Yeah, you bring her
And it
in.
turned out,
That's
hmm,
She needs in service. She need to be brought into the office,
yeah,
because there should be a policy about that. You should have a
hmm,
policy um
yes,
that kind of, that should be a conversation, to let them know, hey, we not, and I can tell you an instance where um, the client, I have a particular client, I can't give any names due to HIPAA
right,
and the safety of the client. So just tell you a little bit about it.
hmm,
And she was talking about how the caregiver was coming in and she was always complaining about how much the agency made, and she found out the agency was making this much, but they was only paying her this much. So
hmm,
she was complaining so bad that the agency started giving her gas cards, but she was complaining to the client. Now, what happens when a caregiver does that?
hmm,
You don't know the psychological state of the client.
right,
Caregivers don't realize when they do that complaining to that client, and that client saying, yeah, okay, you're making that client feel like they are the problem,
yes,
because they
hmm,
are the one that need the services, and you're complaining about what it's costing you to get to them to provide the service.
Right.
So that client is feeling like, well, she don't want to take care of me. She don't want to be here.
Hmm.
They're not looking at it that you having financial hardships, because they having hardships too. You wouldn't
Exactly.
be there if they wasn't. So they not looking at it like that. They looking at it like, oh, she complaining, she don't want to be here.
Right.
So now this client is getting down in their spirits. You're triggering a a a,
A
a situation
downward spiral.
right in that client. So what do you do? What do you do
Hmm.
in a situation like that? You call that caregiver in, and you go back to that policy that she signed,
Hmm.
and let her know we can't do this. Now
Yes.
we finna go through the proceeding. You finna we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna in service you on this. We're gonna give you a warning, and please don't repeat the same steps. So what they did, they gave her a gas card, and then after they gave her the gas card, she still continue to complain. So
Wow.
the client started looking for another agency,
Oh
just
my
like that.
goodness.
And so caregivers, I get it, but that's not the place. Though that they are sick people. Why in the world are you in a sick person house doing that? Like,
Exactly.
and
Yes.
and when it comes to also, and why do caregivers sometimes argue with some of these clients
Mm,
on, that's gonna escalate their health?
exactly. You
I
don't want to
know
do or talk about anything that's going to
that's
escalate any aggressive
yeah.
thoughts, emotions, or behaviors in clients.
You handle it with the most humblest of behavior that you can have. That's why you have
Hmm.
your in services, and that's why the competency test that I give my staff, which is 50 questions, are
Hmm.
live situations. It's not from a book,
Right.
you sitting in the classroom. No, these are actual situations that can or could happen in the home. So that's
Hmm.
how we train our staff.
Yes.
And they have to have the competency test in before they can start.
Yeah.
So I give it to them to take home, and the day before they start or the day they start, that test need to be under my door in my office and with 100% rating.
Right.
And it tells them, what are you getting tested for? These are the criteria. These are the areas, and then and I have an open door policy. I know that there should be some boundary there, but my open door policy for my staff and in services and combative behavior, text me.
Hmm.
I let them text me right then and there at the time that they are having a situation, so I can help them de-escalate. With my agency is different from yours. Me being
Hmm.
the owner, I am the first person in. I build
Yeah.
the care plan and the record with the family first.
Hmm.
Then I'm able to match a caregiver to what I see the needs are, and that way, if the caregiver has any issues in the home with the family, I already know what's going on
Hmm.
somewhat, and I'm able to intervene and help the caregiver de-escalate the situation, or help the family de-escalate the situation, whichever one comes first.
Yes. Good stuff, man. Good
It
stuff.
is.
Yeah, we got a lot of wheels turning up in my brain. I don't know about yours, but
It
um,
is.
so I believe that you touched a lot on de-escalation. Making sure the client is safe. I added in to
Yeah.
try to observe what might be the cause of aggravation. Look at the client's body language. Do they wince? Are they in pain? Are they crying? Just try to figure
Yeah.
out as best you can, and then also communicate clear boundaries. You're not going to talk to me that way, but we're going to sit here and we're going to figure this
And
out together.
and you got some families where you just can't do anything with them. You
Yeah,
know, they are just there, and sometimes you just have to move on.
yeah,
And the same way with caregivers. Some caregivers are just not gonna do what need to be done, so you move on, and
hmm,
just know that that may be a possibility that may happen in that situation. I had a family that I had to move on from. It was just a
hmm.
lot, and
Yes. I've recently had to do that myself.
I know, and sometimes you just wonder, like, Jesus.
Hmm.
But anyway,
How would you? I know we've spoken about this personally, but uh, recently I had to deal with a sexual harassment from a family member of a client towards a caregiver. And uh, tell us a little bit about how that kind of harassment from family members, specifically
So,
sexual harassment, should be handled.
yes, it did happen to a caregiver with my agency, and the caregiver, she texts me, um, and I guess a lot of people say, "Well, I hear her saying her she get her caregivers an open door policy to test. So are they not? Or is it a policy where they're not supposed to have their phones in their hand?" Yes, we do have a policy that
Hmm.
the caregivers are not on their phones and they're attentive to the client. But however, in a case like that, text me.
Yes.
I don't want to know at the end of the shift. I want to know now so we
Hmm.
can fix the problem. And then I can call the family and talk to the family and let them know, hey, we have a situation going on right now.
Hmm.
Um, so telling them to text me it helps with the situation. And what I was
Hmm.
gonna say was, can you ask me the question again? Because I had so much on my mind. I'm so excited.
It's okay. Yeah, we're just talking about sexual harassment either from a
Yeah.
client or a
So
family member.
the caregiver texted me and I immediately called her. I called her on FaceTime because I
Hmm.
had to see it for my own eyes. And when I
Right.
called her on FaceTime, her phone was already turned towards the person.
Hmm.
And he did not know I was on that FaceTime. And he has a 72-inch TV.
Hmm.
And it was porn.
Oh no.
And the caregiver was sitting at the kitchen counter at the bar behind the participant, cooking his dinner.
Hmm.
And he was doing what he was doing, but he was calling her name.
Wow.
And I said, I'm on my way.
Hmm.
I stopped what I was doing. I got in my car because she was crying. And I was on my way because I knew she was going to walk out. And I did not want her to walk out.
Right.
But she had been telling me about the situation. I could never catch it. And his family was always defending him.
Right.
So this time I was able to get there. Um, I told her, I said, why don't you go on outside? I said, sit on the porch because he didn't even hear me come in the house.
Hmm.
And I sat on the couch. I said, good evening. How you doing today? And he jumped. He jumped. He almost jumped out his chair. He was trying to get the TV turned off and he dropped the remote and I picked the remote up. He was trying to put his stuff back up. He was just
Oh my
and he could
goodness.
not say a word because he had
Yeah.
been caught. And right then and there, I terminated the services. I sent
Hmm.
the video to his family members because his family members was out of town, and
Hmm.
they didn't believe it. They was making excuses. So in a case like that, it was just time to let that go.
Yeah.
That was too
Yeah,
much.
there are certain levels where we're just not we can't,
Well, I have a zero
allow.
policy period because
Exactly.
if you even say, okay, we're not gonna let this happen again, then they're gonna feel like, okay, well, I can get away with it again.
Right.
And you don't know the state of your caregiver on that level. She may have been through some
Hmm.
type of abuse and you have no clue, and it could trigger her. So
Exactly.
you have to protect your company, number one, your caregivers,
Hmm.
and you have to let the family know about their loved ones and just say, hey, I'm sorry, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to provide services due to this, because
Hmm.
that just is not acceptable for nobody.
Yeah. Yeah, there has to come a point where people and their feelings come before billing hours.
Yeah, and it's just, we have to do what we have to do to protect. It's
Yes.
at the end of the day. Yeah.
It's not only protecting clients, it's also protecting the caregivers. And we also do that by providing education to the caregivers, letting them know their rights, know how to de escalate, know when enough is enough, when boundaries have been crossed. And sometimes you have to even teach people what boundaries are. A lot of people, they grow up, they don't have any idea what boundaries are,
Right.
they grow up, thinking anyone and everyone has access to them,
Right.
in any way that they want, and that's just not reality. Um, so yeah, we really have to not only protect the clients, our patients, but especially our caregivers, because caregivers are the backbone of our organizations. They are on, the front lines, holding ground with the people that we call clients.
Right. That is so true. That is definitely true. I agree.
So, handling unpleasant and aggressive behaviors or even harassment from family members, zero tolerance.
Right. You do your documentation for your records. You
Yes.
document, and you don't do it by yourself. You always have a witness to those
Hmm.
type of things because families can, try to sue you,
Hmm.
in a case like that. So that's why you have your insurance policies in place to
Yes.
protect you and your staff. And documentation is so needed where now in this time, everything moving fast, people don't want to write anymore. Like the schools don't
Hmm.
have books anymore. And I'm like, well, how do you kids gonna learn? They ain't got no books.
Right.
Um, and like we was talking about earlier, put notebooks in the house, company notebooks. So there is documentation, in
Hmm.
my in services with clients that require documentation. We are talking about the documentation and they sign a documentation policy in onboarding.
Hmm. I know we've talked a lot about some extreme situations, and they do happen.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they try to veer away from telling caregivers that these kinds of situations hardly ever happen, but no, they happen more often than we know,
Right.
or that's led on. Um, so they are frequent, and sometimes, we let things roll off our chest, such as, something that was said to us, out of aggression from either a family member or a client. Um, and family members too, the same de-escalation process should be the same for family members as well as clients,
Right.
let them vent. Chances are they're not after you. Chances are they're just, they're overwhelmed, they're aggravated, they got a lot of things going on. Maybe there's some family arguments that you know nothing about. So if family members, um, in a less aggressive, setting, maybe they are showing some unpleasant, attitudes towards you as a caregiver. More 9 times out of 10, it's nothing you've done. It's everything that they're going through, that they're feeling. So just be open, and listen to them. And you don't necessarily always have to provide a solution to their situation, but if it is something that, the agency can help with, of course, direct the family member to talk to the director or supervisor or your RN. Um, Caregivers should always direct hefty questions, as I like to call them, and hefty situations to the director, whoever's in charge of the agency. Um, always, have your boundaries. Absolutely is no physical aggression or physical abuse is acceptable. And if you are going through that, absolutely, leave. Get yourself out of that situation.
That's right.
And seek immediate help.
Right.
But in less aggressive situations where it might be unpleasant or uncomfortable, seek to de escalate, you know.
Yeah. And if you see aggression in the home in between the members in a, you can make a report,
Hmm.
to your supervisors or whatever.
Yes.
I guess you say, well, if you're the only agency in there with the home, what do you do with that information? Um, that information can be sent to Department of Social Services to
Yes.
to the elderly division, if
Hmm.
need be, if you see that there's an immediate need, you know,
Hmm.
if you are working with the state and you're providing services for a state a participant, they have a case manager. You can report the information, to the case manager and they can
Hmm.
intervene, so there are things that you can do to help, you
Yes.
know, make the situation a lot better.
Hmm.
Just follow your policy and procedures,
Hmm.
to try to save a life. Don't, and the newest policy that we added to our agency, because that can affect a combative situation in social media. We have a social
Mm-hmm.
media policy. Our staff cannot use social media when they're in the homes
Mm-hmm.
around the staff. They cannot post anything about our agency, our company, our clients. That
Yeah.
is automatic termination. They cannot. And
Mm-hmm.
you keep your Facebook or whatever away from me, because some of the things that you have on there, I may not see acceptable for the reputation of my company.
Mm-hmm.
So that too can have a lot to do with what's going on in between the caregiver and the client, setting that boundary in between, just setting boundaries, and
Yes.
not, letting the caregivers, not go all the way there with that person thinking that, oh, this is
Mm-hmm.
my best friend. No, that's a person that needs services. They need
Yes.
help.
Another thing that just crossed my mind as far as, potential risks or triggers that could cause aggression in clients is something that we would have no control over. And that would be, we're dealing with an older generation. And there have been instances where I've had to deal with racism from clients. And I have had to make sure I did not have my black caregivers go into a certain client's home because they were racist and they did have dementia and everything, but that was a trigger. If they saw a person of color, it didn't matter who it was. If I would have been a person of color, they would have been triggered by me.
Yes.
So we have to keep that in mind too. It's an older generation who lived a completely different lifestyle than we do now. There's more education as far as, racism and everything nowadays than there were back then. Um,
Yeah.
so we have to keep those things in mind as well. And
That is
there
so
have
true.
yeah, it is, and
Yeah.
it is unfortunate, and but and it kind of makes me uncomfortable just talking about it, but
Well,
it's
I'm glad you talk.
reality.
I mean, I am a black woman. I'm not
Yes,
gonna
you are.
say African American. I'm black. Okay, y'all, for the listeners out there, and I understand exactly what you're saying. As me, a
Hmm.
black woman, being the head of a company, walking into a home dressed up, to
Hmm.
say, "Hey, my name is Cicely Baker. I'm the creator of Be Patient Caregiver. How are you doing today?" And I
Hmm.
always watch the eyebrows.
Yes.
I always watch the
Hmm.
eyebrows because they raise, and then
Hmm.
this person is sitting there with you, and then you can hear a pin drop in the room because they're like, oh,
Right.
wow, like this black lady sitting in my house, presenting, and I see it all the time, and that's why train. I
Hmm.
train caregivers. I talk to them because we all know that our older generation, our babies, they're not our babies, but our older generation that's in their 90s, their
Hmm.
hundreds and 80s, we know that was the peak of racism.
Yes.
So that long-term memory of racism is going to come out in between the dementia, but you train your staff to know the difference. You train
Hmm.
your staff to provide one-on-one center care. You train them to know dementia and know reality, and
Yes.
you train your staff to be able to elaborately work around that client and their racism for that day
Hmm.
to last another day. And that's what I do because it happened. I
Hmm.
had a caregiver call me and said, I believe, such and such got a little racism. I said, yes, you do. I
Yeah.
said, that come with the territory. I said, but I'm the first one in, and I've worked with her for 2 weeks, so I
Hmm.
know how to work with her. I said, you just have to work around her and give her the utmost respect. I said, it's gonna come out, but act like you don't hear it and you're there for your job. I said, that's why you have training so you can effectively provide one-on-one
Hmm.
center care with a person that's being race, showing a little bit of
Yes.
racism, because I learned with those, it don't always last that long because their memory is jumping around.
Yes. Hmm.
And
And that's what we have to keep in mind is, yes, they are exhibiting behavior that might hurt our
yeah,
feelings, and your feelings are valid if they
they
are hurt.
are. They are valid, y'all. We ain't saying
But
that
we
they're
have to,
not.
yes, yes, your feelings and your thoughts of whatever aggression is being thrown your way is very valid. However, we're just trying to help you, learn to be emotionally intelligent enough to uh, maintain the level of care that's needed, because that's what you're there to do. You're not there to argue. You're not there to do anything of that nature. You're there to provide companionship and care. And if assistance is needed, you immediately need to call in some assistance. But aside from that, you know, uh, in cases, I have actually recently made an agreement with a local therapist company
Mm-hmm.
here in Christiansburg, and I have offered. They've agreed to let Carosity, my company, pay for any caregiver that's contracted with Carosity who needs therapists,
That's
who
a
needs
good
therapy.
idea.
Yeah. And so I've reached out to all my caregivers, and there's a few that have already taken advantage of it. And I pay for 2 sessions per month for 6 months for them to receive some therapy services.
I like
They don't,
that.
yeah, they don't need to tell me why they want therapy. It's all confidential. They don't need to tell me anything other than, hey, I'd like to take advantage of this. And they fill out a little information form with the therapy company, and then the therapy company sends Carosity the bill.
That is amazing.
But if you're a caregiver and you're dealing with aggression that does hurt your feelings, and you feel like there might be some, trauma coming from years of handling aggression, and you need some outlet, by all means, seek some therapy. Talk to somebody. Maybe it doesn't even need to be a therapist, but just open up and talk about it. And that's the best way to de-escalate yourself, um, so that you don't hold any um, chips on your shoulder towards clients, because that can happen. There's only so much behavior you can take from a person before you start feeling like you got a chip on your shoulder, or that you have to be in survival mode when you're around that person, and you shouldn't have to feel that way.
Right.
So you could always request to be, moved to another client, or if you choose to stay with that client, you can talk about it to a therapist, or just open up to somebody about it, because what you feel and what you think are valid
Mhm.
as a caregiver.
That's right. That's absolutely true. I like that because you're really looking out, as an in-home care provider, you're providing services for the participants, but you're also providing services. It's almost like a concierge services for your staff, making sure
Hmm.
your staff are still capable to go into homes and provide the care, and they're feeling good that day, and you're at least trying. You can't relieve all their stress, but you can relieve some stress, and you can let your caregivers know, hey, I care about you. And that
Yes.
benefit of knowing that your employer care about you will make your employees stay with you no matter what. They're not gonna
Hmm.
go anywhere because they feel like they're at home. They feel like, hey, I'm working for an employer that cares about my well-being.
Yes.
And it
And
makes
that is, yes.
yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
And it makes a difference
It
in your
really
in your
does.
mission and the vision for your company.
Hmm. One of my mission statements is, and slogans actually, is leading the way for better home care. And a
Yeah.
lot of people take that as, better for the care recipient, which, yes, that has a lot to do with it. But leading the way for better home care includes everything and everyone in home care. And that includes the caregivers, family members, and clients, of course, and their family members. So that's what my vision and when I started Carosity, I already knew that I was going to compensate the caregivers better than any other company around here, and that's what I'm doing.
Right.
Um, they are very well taken care of. Um, my I don't mind putting this out here, but my caregivers, they make anywhere from $18 to $26 per hour.
That's amazing. You're doing so
Yes.
wonderful.
And I will, depending on the care load, I've made a commitment to myself that I will, you know, sacrifice profit to make sure caregivers are well taken care of. I haven't had to do that. The company has been taken care of, and we're not in debt or anything like that. So, and the caregivers, for 99% of the time, they are very happy. There are some situations that arise, like this sexual harassment case, where, things like that are going to happen and we have to be prepared for it. And as leaders of our companies, we have to be prepared for that so we can prepare those who work for us for those
Right.
situations. And we have to have those uncomfortable conversations, just like, I was just saying that, talking about racism was kind of making me a little uncomfortable, because, you're my friend and you're a woman of color.
Oh yeah.
And, talking about that as a white person, you know, I'm sure any white person would probably feel a little uncomfortable talking about that, but
Yeah.
I could be wrong,
No,
but
I can imagine that to be that way, and I have a lot of, white friends, and I'm colorblind. My one of
hmm
my best mentors, best friend, Lord April Dyson. Shout out to her. Oh my God,
hmm
it's just she gets upset. She doesn't like
yes,
undercover racism, and she doesn't,
right.
because we be in networking groups and rooms, and some people have like the good old boy system in their pocket when they come
Oh
to
my
the,
gosh.
and she gets, and that just burn her up, and she be like, how dare them come in here looking like, and I get so tickled with her, but it do happen,
hmm
and that's a society, that we live in, and it can be worse in some areas than others, and where I live at. That's a
hmm
big thing down here, and but it makes
Yeah.
you got to have skin in the game, okay?
Yep.
You got to be tough, and you
Yep.
can't wear your feelings on your sleeves because you got to know how to professionally fight back.
Emotional intelligence.
Yes, that's that professionally fighting back. You got to know how to fight back with a smile on your face
hmm
and a hug across their back. And they ain't gonna
hmm
know what to do. So you got my mama taught me this. She said, honey, you fight with a smile on your face, girl. Just fight,
Yes.
smile. They won't know what happened.
Amen to that.
Yeah,
Your mama knew right.
that's right. I really did
Oh,
enjoy this podcast. It was some good subjects.
yes, absolutely. A lot of tough subjects too. And, that's what this podcast is really all about, is touching on those tough subjects that really need to be educated.
I'm
Or,
telling you.
yeah.
Need to be brought to the surface. And I feel like the more we do this podcast, we will gradually build our communities,
Yes.
from South Carolina to Virginia. Because one state in
hmm
between us is North Carolina. We definitely can love on North Carolina and
hmm
partnership with other in home. Care home owners that listen to this podcast and reach out to you. And
hmm
I'm looking forward to us getting together and going over these in services and policy and procedures and how to. I can see us having seminars and these big
Yes.
huge events with turnouts, and we are just,
Oh, listen to that vision, y'all.
yeah, and we're gonna have people that doing testimonies, and the whole goal is that everybody leave with something,
mm, perfect.
you know.
I'll tell you what we'll do, Cicely. I'll start expanding down to North Carolina. You start expanding up to North
Yes,
Carolina, and we'll meet in the middle.
I'm trying to tell you, definitely we this happen and do it differently than any other in-home care company has ever done in any form of history. I don't think it's ever been done.
I don't think so either. I have
Yeah.
never heard of it.
Yeah.
In my area, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring home care companies together. And
Yeah.
like we talked about the other day, I want to bring home care companies together to create synergy, uh, in the name of bettering home care, making home care better.
See,
And
you already got the name, and
mm,
you got the code. You already got it, synergy,
Mhm.
and then your little sentence that goes with it. You already have it. See, you just need to write that down and lock that in and make sure nobody else own it.
Right.
Yeah.
Copyrighted.
I'm trying to tell you because people own stuff and you have no clue they own it.
Oh, I know. Yeah. There are some things I come up with I think that are original, and it turns out that they're not. But it's still a good idea.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think that home care companies, of course, there should be some level of competition, of course. But when it comes to the care of care recipients and caregivers, that should be non-negotiable, and we should all lock arms. And whatever the need is, we should be able to call on one another in the name of care for care recipients and caregivers alike.
That's right.
Our bottom line you know, should not mean anything to us. People's lives should be more important than profit. But like I said, there obviously should be some level of competition out there, and I love a good competition. But let's not play dirty. Let's not have people suffer so we can try to make a profit.
Right.
But that's my preaching for the day.
Amen to that. And that's okay, you guys. And I want you, our audience, man, to take into this. And it is so good to do Q&A. If you have questions, reach out to Curiosity and Mr. Jeremy on YouTube and leave your questions so we can continue to create a caregiver community based upon
Hmm.
you guys and your current live experiences that you're having, so we can help you create a better one-on-one centered care in the home for your loved ones and be able to
Yes.
knock out some of these issues that's causing unnecessary frustration in the process, because no caregiving experience should go through this. It should be the best caregiving experience that you build. So please, you guys, reach out. Tell us
Mm.
who you are. Tell us where you're listening from, where you're coming
Hmm.
from, and tell us what it's like in your area.
Yeah. Tell us your stories. We love to hear stories.
And yes, we will definitely be here to listen to you guys. Thank
Hmm.
you. Yeah.
Well, Cicely, thank you so much, man. This is an awesome episode, and I'm so glad only you and I could have done this episode. I tell
I'm
you.
telling you. We got this. We got this under control and it's gonna blow up. It is
Be
going
patient,
to.
caregiving, and carosity heading your way, y'all.
It's gonna blow up. It's coming.
Oh man. Well, thank you so much, Cicely. I hope you have a blessed evening,
You
and we will talk
too.
soon.
All right. Thank you so much. And good night, audience. We love you. Thank you for being our listeners. And please share our information with other listeners and tag in. All
Absolutely.
right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of CareCast as we explore the heart of care. We hope you found value and insight in its content. If you'd like to support CareCast, please subscribe and share. You can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube Music, Spotify, or Apple Podcast. You can also listen to CareCast on our website at carosity.care and click on CareCast. CareCast is created by Carosity, a private in-home care provider. If you or someone you know needs private in-home care or has questions about home care, please contact us at 540-266-2189. You can also contact us on our website at carosity.care. That's CAREOSITY.care. Thank you so much. Be well.